for patterns, tricks, stitches and tips, wands and needles, embroidery.
In this video, I'm going to be demonstrating satin stitch. I like to refer to this stitch as a full coverage fill stitch, meaning that you're going to be using it to fill a space and it's going to be completely covering the fabric underneath. As its name suggests, satin stitch is going to give a satin effect to your stitching. And it's really just formed by laying down stitches close together, side by side in the same direction. And you're going to begin by just bringing your needle up through the back of your fabric along the one edge of your shape or space that you're trying to fill in. And then you're going to run your thread the full length to the opposite edge and bring your needle back through. I usually like to start in the middle like I'm doing when I'm doing satin stitch, and then work to the one edge and then go back to the middle and work the opposite half. But you certainly can start at one edge and just work all the way across. There's no right or wrong, it's just what you're comfortable with. And I find that this method is what works best for me. So then I'm going to bring my needle back up again right next to my first stitch. And I'm going to run my thread the full length of my space here and pull that back through on the opposite edge. I'm just going to keep laying down these stitches side by side until I reach that far right edge. And satin stitch generally works better for smaller spaces. The longer your stitches become, the more wobbly and twisted they can get, and you're going to lose some of that satiny effect. That's not to say that you can't use this stitch for a larger space. You just want to be aware of the limitations that that's going to pose and decide whether or not that's really what you want for that space. You can see right now I'm working satin stitch in a vertical orientation, but it can also be worked horizontally or even diagonally. You're just going to use that same method of whichever direction your stitches are going, you're going to lay down those stitches right next to each other so that they're all lined up. Once I've reached the edge of my shape, I'm going to then go back to the middle. Again, I'm just going to go down up through my fabric right next to that previous stitch. And then I'm going to continue laying down stitches in the opposite direction until I've filled in the left half of my shape. A general look at how you would do satin stitch. Now there are a couple tips that can help, especially at first if you find that you're having trouble getting your stitches lined up and things just aren't looking quite the way you'd like. There are a couple tips that can help with that. One thing that you can do is to go ahead and add an outline stitch. This is going to give you kind of a little bit more of a raised guideline to go by as you're laying down your stitches, and can help keep the edges of your stitches lined up a little bit easier. So here I'm just doing a simple back stitch, kind of give my shape that extra little bit of outline that I can follow as I'm stitching. If you do decide to use this technique, you want to be sure that you bring your needle up and down on the outside of that outline stitch as you lay down your satin stitches. So when you're done, you're going to no longer see that outline stitch. It's going to be all hidden away under your satin stitches. So I would then do that along both sides, both edges. In this case, my stitches are going to run horizontally, so I would do it along both my left and my right edge of the space that I'm filling in. Again, it's just going to give me that kind of guideline to go by. The other thing that I can do to help my stitches line up next to one another a little easier is you'll see how I've drawn in these guidelines. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stitch those before I start laying down my stitches side by side. So I would bring these across. And then once I have those guidelines laid down, I can then go back through and fill in the space in between. So those are just a couple tips that can help if you find that you're having trouble getting your stitches to line up the way you'd like. Also, another thing that I find, it's personally for me easier to work my satin stitches in a vertical direction. I'm not sure why, but I find that that's easier. So if I'm doing a shape that's technically horizontal, I'll oftentimes just turn my hoop so that I can work those stitches vertically rather than horizontally. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. So just a couple little tips that can help, but in general, that's how you're going to do satin stitch.